my name is Jess Quinn. I am from New Zealand, so not too far global, but global. I struggle to put in one sentence what I do. I have come to describe myself as a storyteller. I kind of share my story as a living. I started as a fashion/product designer, and now talk about myself every day,
Love that.
which is interesting. Yeah.
And what is your disability?
I am an amputee. I had a really unique amputation. So I had what's called a rotation plasty. So I highly recommend anyone listening to Google it, because there is no way you can visually understand it by a description.
Okay.
But basically I have a knee my knee is my old heel, and my old quad is my calf muscle.
All right.
Okay, I'm Googling it right now.
I played tennis against people with the same thing.
Oh,
Really?
okay.
And yeah, because it's like you use your heel as a knee joint, so your foot's backwards kind of thing. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
my foot's backwards.
I love it how you turn everyone to Google, because everyone listening right now is going to pull over and be like, yeah, I'm going to Google that right now. Which
I'm
I like.
Googling it right now. So yes, you turn your heel into your knee joint, but do you, I mean, I'm sure the rest of the foot is amputated itself, so you're just using, no, your foot is backwards.
You would be, everyone think that I still have to cut my toenails once a week, or else they rub in my prosthetic.
So I used to play tennis. There was a guy.
I had no idea. Just looking at this photo, I'm like, oh, surely you get rid of the toes. You
No,
don't.
because you use the foot. So
Now the toes, they work quite well as like a grip almost. And also, I guess by cutting off the toes, you're adding an unnecessary scar that doesn't need to be there, right?
Good. Well, we'll get into why it helps you walk and stuff, but just anecdotally, I used to play tennis. There was a guy called, I still play tennis, but he doesn't play anymore. His name's Ronald Vink. He was Dutch, size 15 feet. And he had the same thing as you, Jess. And when he would hit the ball, his feet were so big, his toes would wiggle. And he would have his foot out. He wouldn't,
outside of the...
Well, because when he's in a wheelchair, your knees sit out, so his foot would be upside down and go forwards. But it just because he had such big feet. When you sit down and your foot goes down, Shout out to Ronald Vink if you're a big fan of the podcast.
Wow,
so
that's amazing.
Why do people choose to do that? Is it for walking benefit or?
For me, the options, because of the cancer I had osteosarcoma, which is a bone cancer. I had it in my femur bone, and you either have a bone replacement, which is risky and can mean a life in and out of hospital and infection, or a full hip disarticulation, which in my case would have been super high into the hip socket. Like the chance of a prosthetic for me would have been next to nothing. So that my only option really, because I couldn't have the bone replacement, was a rotation plasty. Which was weird in 2001 when there was no way to just hashtag search rotation plasty and no one in New Zealand had it done before. So it was a bit of an odd one.
We're going to talk about your story, the cancer story, and go back to your childhood and those moments with yourself and your family, of course, and dissect that in full. But while we're on this topic of you being a storyteller first and foremost and fashion designer, you were also an international model. Did you come across many people with disabilities in the international model world, and how did your fellow peers treat you in that industry, which can be cutthroat, very vacuous and vain?
Yeah, I didn't, to answer your first question, really come across any others. I obviously know of others who have disabilities who I've seen on certain catwalks. Obviously, it's few and far between, which is the reason I wanted to do it. But there's definitely, and alongside of the modeling, I do a lot of kind of speaking or panel speaking, and a lot of the stuff we talk about is this kind of tokenism within the body image space, if you like. So, or within representation, whether that be disability or size or ethnicity, whatever it is. It's just, you often turn up to the photo shoot and you're like, I know why I'm here. You're quite clearly the girl to tick a box for a brand, or the person.
Hey, how do you think I have this job? No, just kidding.
I'm the token able-bodied guy.
Token able-bodied white guy over there. Yeah. See, we're dominating this conversation, Jess, which I like.
But it's an interesting kind of space, I guess. And a part of me is like, I don't want to be here if a brand's just trying to tick a box. But then by ticking a box, then that's hopefully one better image out in the world. So
interesting. Yeah, absolutely. You rock up and you can see a couple of women of different sizes. You've got different ethnicities, and you've got a person with a disability. You rock up and you go, okay, well, these people just want to come across as the diverse brand for all people.
Totally.
I want to add to that now as well. And I'm not saying anything negative towards other streams of diversity. right? But especially in the industry that you work, disability is always the last one ticked, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like they always do race, gender, sexual orientation, color, and then they're like, oh, we're done. And I was like, hang on. I always used to be like, sorry, what? You're done? What about the biggest minority group in the world? You know what I mean? Do you feel like you're kind of like one of, if not the first of what you kind of did? How did you feel when you first got into the industry as, I guess, trailblazing, trying to influence change in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously daunting, and it's a hard one because I don't feel like I've had a fair representational understanding of the industry, because the photo shoots that I would be doing was largely for brands who are trying to really push this message. So for the large part, they're reasonably supportive of it. You know, I wasn't walking for Gucci, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't think I've been in an environment where I'm really not welcome because these brands are doing it because they are inclusive in some kind of way, if that makes sense. So yeah, but I mean, it's a hard one. I think I tried to just get in there and be like everyone else is, as a lot of us do in that situation or in those kind of situations, and just do what I'm there to do. But it is really hard sometimes to push through when you do feel that obvious sense of tokenism. Yeah.
Now, Jess, you feel you're obviously speaking about your own thoughts around tokenism. I dated an international model, and I know the world that she lived in New York, the sacrifices and ridiculous effort she went to do what she believed was fitting in with the social cue norm of being a model. When you feel that you have your own tokenism, did you feel that when you rocked up to those sets, other models were thinking, oh, the same way? Did you have that as well, kind of leaning into your mindset that someone else is looking, going, oh, okay, my friend Rebecca didn't get this job because, you know, Jess is over here and they want the girl with the disability. Did you feel another sense of someone else's expectations of that shoot as well?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question the right way or answer your question at all, but I do often feel, and I by no means, I've done a lot of modeling, but I haven't been on the full modeling circuit, but I do often feel like a little outsider in the shoot. You know, there's like, the modeling industry is a very cool girl industry, you know, and I think unfortunately people don't see me as a part of that. And so because of the tokenism thing, I guess they could be like, oh yeah, she's here for a separate purpose, you know, and it does sometimes feel like that, but not all the time by all means. Like I've done a lot of shoots that it is just really wholesome and amazing. But yeah, it's they're definitely, you get that sense.
Yeah.
That's such BS.
Of course.
Yeah.
Like why can't the disability, you know, the awesome, talented, great storytelling female over there with one leg be part of the cool crew? It's BS.
Totally.
Yeah,
and it's something I must say, I've never faced that in my life. People assume, and we'll get into this later, but people assumed I was bullied at school and all of these things. I've never faced any of that in my life. But being in the modeling industry, and there was no bullying or anything, but you do kind of feel a bit like.
And it's very competitive as well as in that industry, and fighting for particular jobs. And I just wondered, you know, whether people would have been like annoyed because the girl with the disability got a job, whereas, you know, I didn't, for, you know, and I'm able-bodied and perfectly beautiful in their own mind. I don't know. It was such a weird world.
I must say, I definitely got, without using a pun, a leg up in that sense, because people wanted someone who was diverse. And so I often didn't go to castings like models do. So I'm not competing against heaps of skinny white girls because they wanted a very narrow role, I guess. So I didn't have to do that rigorous kind of casting process and everything. Like the modeling industry, as you say, is so competitive, so to not have had to have done that was quite nice.
I'm just trying to put myself in
win
your
some,
shoes
you
in
lose
those
some.
moments. You're just unbelievable.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you got it, flaunt it. I use my wheelchair all the time to get gigs, so I think
Yeah.
it's exactly the same. Now, obviously, you were born. You mentioned it briefly before, but you were born able-bodied. You're from New Zealand. Before we get into your disability, got to ask you, speaking about BS, do you think it's BS that New Zealanders can come to Australia at the moment and not quarantine, yet we have to quarantine to come see you? What's with that?
I don't really know, but to be fair, we have to quarantine on the return, so you're still
true.
quarantined.
Good point, Dil.
But it's not much of a bubble if we can't come hang out with you either.
I know. I think it's really crap, and I would love to hang out with a whole lot of my Australian friends.
We'll be there soon. So I just want to get a feel of what you were like growing up. So you obviously said before you had cancer and stuff like that, but before that, what kind of, you know, young girl were you? Tell us a bit about your life.
Yeah, I have a very small recollection. Partly, obviously, trauma blocks a lot of things, but also I was only 8, and I don't think a lot of us remember life before being 8. But I was a super athletic kid. I grew up in an amazing family. I have 2 sisters who were and are my best friends. And sport was my whole life. My whole 8 years, I should say. But I really love sport. I played in everything. I was born before a time of social media, so my weekends were filled with just anything outside. I was just that kid who was in the top of every team. I could have never have played the sport, and I would trial and I would get in the top. Like, I was just naturally athletic, and yeah, running was kind of my thing. But I was just a pretty average kid. Just liked sport, loved animals, had cool sisters, great parents.
Did you have any touch points? Did you have any touch points to disability pre you having your diagnosis? Did you know anything about it? Do you have any family members? Did your family know anything about it?
No, not really. I had a second cousin who's got Down syndrome, who we don't spend a lot of time with, but we'd grown up together a little bit. Both of my parents, not a disability, but in terms of the illness I went through, my dad had a stomach cancer, and both my grandparents had died of cancer. So we were kind of familiar with the illness side of things, if you like, but not a huge amount of exposure to disability at all.
So how did you come to find out that you had cancer? What was the moments leading up to, was it pains in the leg, or tell us how you found out?
I actually was outside playing one day, and I stood on a soccer ball. So I was just trying to balance, on a soccer ball. Thought it would be really cool. Yeah. Fell to the ground, fractured my femur bone, which is supposed to be the strongest bone in your body, and got rushed to hospital. They put pins up my legs trying to fix the break and sent me on my way. And there is countless records of me or my dad reporting with pain in my car. So they would take my cast off and be like, oh no, like we can feel a little bit of a callus under here, but it's just scar tissue. And there was like reports of that over about 4 months, until they were like, oh, she's been complaining a lot. And I was out of plaster trying to get back to walking at this point, and I was still complaining. And so they took me seriously finally. And yeah, ran a whole lot of tests, and that the word callus really quickly turned into osteosarcoma, which I'm sure raised a few eyebrows. So
we got the C right. We just the rest of it was a bit murky.
Close enough.
Callus and cancer. It's a typo. It's a typo.
There was a massive sum going.
Something on.
I know
different ends of the spectrum.
You're only 8, and it's a fair bit of trauma. Can you remember when they told you that it was cancerous? What you felt? Did you understand what was going on?
I don't remember the exact cancer conversation. I remember the amputation conversation a little bit better. But my life, I think I had already spent probably about 4 months at that point in the medical world by getting my break seen to in surgeries and all of that kind of stuff. And so it kind of had just started to become a little bit normal. And then all of a sudden I was back in hospital, straight into chemo, all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, so I don't remember that exact conversation, but I remember little bits throughout that journey of I understood, and my parents and the people around me were really open and letting me in on that journey. I wasn't kind of shunned out of it. But I think there's only so much you can understand as an 8-year-old kid. I knew I was sick and it was really bad, and everyone around me had no hair and feeding tubes and, all sorts of things going on. But you just, I think, the normal becomes really normal really quickly, or the abnormal becomes really normal really quickly, and then you don't know right from wrong anymore, I think.
Yeah,
you become accustomed to it in hospital, don't you?
Totally.
I've always got this image in my head of on my ward where I was like 10 years old, had an operation that went wrong, and I spent 6 months in there, and in the room next to me was a bunch of males and females with eating disorders. And they were like incredibly skinny and really sick, and they passed away and things like that. And I was 9, I'm going, what's going on here? And my mum's like, oh, well, these people. And I just remember vividly like it was yesterday, you know what I mean? And I shouldn't remember that as a 9-year-old, but I just can't.
Oh, totally.
I can't get it out of your head because you just, as you said, you grow up so fast. And so does your family. Was there, I don't know enough about cancer. I'm just going to be asked because I'm oblivious. Is there...
Sure.
Is the reason that you got it is because it was in your blood? Was it a genetic thing?
No. Weirdly, it's the weirdest coincidence, but none of the cancers we've had in our family are at all connected or hereditary.
That's so weird.
Or genetic. It's really weird, and they all happen quite within a close space of time. So yeah, it was, and I only you kind of understand your parents' life as you get older because you become an adult and people around you become parents, and so you understand what they went through a little bit more. But it's only now that I think, my mum lost her dad to cancer, my dad had a stomach tumor, who's absolutely fine now, and me within the space of I think 2 years.
Wow.
And at the time I didn't, you don't know time as a kid, you're like a puppy, it has no association with any kind of time. But yeah, it's crazy. And as you say, the stuff, I had a young girl who, it was a sibling of her brother had cancer at the age of 1. He'd never left the hospital since he was born. And she came into my room one morning and said her brother had gone to sleep forever. And I was in there having chemo had a very similar fate in my reality. And, just going through that kind of stuff is, as you say, stuff that you will just, never forget.
So do you remember having a say about if you were part of the discussion around the amputation itself, or just your parents
Good
being...
question. Are you asked or are you told?
Yeah.
I don't remember, to be truly honest, but to be fair, there wasn't really a decision to be made. It was either death or a rotation plasty in my situation. So there wasn't a situation where there was a question to ask. But I definitely remember being a little bit a part of the process around the rotation plasty, because that was a decision. I guess my parents would have to make a decision if they just did the full hip disarticulation or the rotation plasty, knowing that the rotation plasty would give me a much better life and ability for independence, but obviously is visually very unusual and was completely unknown to all of us. So yeah, I remember being a little bit along for the ride for that, but yeah, there wasn't really any decisions to be had.
Part of your incredible storytelling, and we're going to share your TED Talk as well, even though I'm sure we'll touch on a lot of the topics of it.
Hang on. Just I like doing this. Hands up if you've done a TED Talk on this podcast. Anyone done? Oh, cool. Just checking.
And I like to do this. Hands up if you have an ounce of humility.
A little bit.
You can put your hand up, Jess.
Okay.
So with your TED Talk, you do talk about body image.
Can I just say, I listen to so many of these podcasts and I am laughing the whole way through it, Dylan's sense of humor, because it just gets me.
Hands up if you've spoken to Prince William. No one cares, mate.
It's Prince Harry, bro. It's not.
Well, it cracks me up.
Hey, no one cares about Prince Harry at the moment. He's all in the news. What are you trying to say? He's coming on the podcast. Big fan of the podcast.
So going back to your TED Talk, you speak about your body image, which is a large part of the discussion you have around, and certainly a reason that we wanted to chat to you on this podcast, because you've got such an incredible angle on it. Do you remember when you're 8 years old, you've had that surgery? Was that the first time that you reflected on yourself, in the mirror or internally, on what you look like in your body image? Was that the start of those discussions as Jess Quinn, the storyteller?
Not at all. I didn't give a shit, to be honest. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
100%. You can go nuts.
I did not care at all. I had been living hell for the last year, and I thought, cool, I've had my leg cut off now. I can go get another leg that will give me the life that I had before, and I'll be right as rain. I didn't realize learning to walk on a prosthetic would be as challenging as it was. Yeah. And that's the amazing naivety of an 8-year-old girl. But my body image issues didn't start until most people, particularly young girls, start probably around 13. So I was going through that as a normal woman does, and I was a normal woman, that's not the right term, but as most women do. And I was also going through coming to terms, I was about 5 years post cancer, and I think I was coming to terms with the fact, I guess, what I'd gone through and the implications that was going to have on my future. So it was kind of a double whammy, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And most of it was also in that 5 years, I went from an 8-year-old to a 13-year-old. Is that 5? I think it's 5.
Good maths.
Quick maths, nailed it.
And, my body was changing drastically, and I was very skinny when I was 6. So all of a sudden, my calf muscle, which was my old quad muscle, isn't growing at the rate that my normal other good thigh is growing. And I really struggled with that, because all of a sudden skinny jeans were baggy jeans on one side and skinny jeans on the other side, and mini skirts, in my opinion, didn't look how I wanted them to look. So I just began to hide away completely. I think I spent 8 years from that point not wearing anything shorter than my knee.
8 years, so 21.
Yeah, I was in my
So you're full-time pants or tights?
I was high top sneakers, full-time pants. We'd go on family vacations to hot places every year, and I would sweat my way through it. And it was just the only way I could see. There was no way I would put on shorts. Why would I put on shorts, And it wasn't until I came out of it that, I mean, a lot of us have to go through these things to understand it better, but I just didn't. It's like I was really confident telling my story. I've always told my story. If someone came up to me in the street and asked why I was limping, I would tell them. But just showing it was a whole nother thing. And I think I was ready to leave behind what I'd gone through, and hiding was the easiest way to do that.
My version of that was having only my face in my MySpace photos.
Wow.
Same thing when I was 13 to 16 because I was embarrassed. When I was in person, I can't have a cloak around me. It looks like I'm in a hovercraft. But
you just hold up one of those, you go to those silly events and they have the fake Instagram square.
Like a curtain around me?
Dylan would just hold up one of those with a curtain below the knees.
I struggled in person to hide it, but online is the only place I could. I used to do the same thing. So there you go.
Yeah.
So 21 years old, do you remember the day that you first wore shorts?
Yeah, I remember the day so clearly. And I'd worn shorts very occasionally at physio because they had to access my leg, but I would buy men's long shorts just to try cover.
Andrew Bogut basketballs.
LeBron James shorts walking down your ankles.
Tight pants? Oh, okay.
That'd be good stuff.
This is not a lie. I would buy track pants, the ones with the zips all the way up the side so that the physio could access my leg really easily, but then I could cover up.
The warm-up pants, that's what they use.
I'd be in the physios looking at it going, she's got zip pants, she's a stripper.
Here we go.
And they're off.
So good. But yeah, I was at a friend's house, some friends from school. It was summer. They were all in their bikinis hanging out by the pool, and I was in my so not cool knee-length denim shorts, and I was sweating. And I remember a friend of mine who I'd been friends with my whole life had said, come upstairs, just throw on some shorts, it's just us. And they will not know to this day how much of a deal that was to me. Like, I remember being so scared. Like, the walk from the pool where we were hanging to her bedroom to get the shorts was the longest walk of my life. And I remember that so clearly. And then she grabbed me a pair of shorts out. She's like, yep, these ones will fit you. Threw them on the bed and left me to get changed. And she literally just would have thought they were throwing on shorts like she would have been. And that moment when I stood in front of the mirror, it was just the biggest deal for me. And to be fair, I had I guess some changes made in my prosthetic over that time that made it more realistic, and I felt more comfortable in my body. I had a prosthetic thigh made that gave me slightly a bigger thigh that matched my other leg. And so there was a few things.
Did you have a skin color
cover?
Okay.
Yeah, it's lycra. I get them custom made at Weta workshops, but all of that kind of led to that moment, I guess. So I can't just say that I all of a sudden found this confidence. There was other things going on, but I remember that being the most liberating feeling in the world, and I never looked back since. And I wear shorts through winter now because I just like shorts.
That's good. I love that as well because, disability aside, I think lots of young women, young men as well, go through that moment as well when they look in the mirror and hate what they see, and then one day they appreciate what they've got, and it kind of changes that mindset. It's an important day, I guess, for you as well. I know I had that day as well when I was about 15 trying to go to house parties that I wasn't invited to. I invited myself and realised I was being an idiot, and my mates were like, oh, we just didn't invite you because we didn't know how it would go, but we wanted you here. And just that feeling of being accepted is massive. Yeah. Do you think if you didn't have that time in the mirror that day, you'd be doing what you're doing now? Was that a real turning point?
It was a massive turning point for me. Definitely. I think I would have eventually found it, but I don't know how much life I would have missed out on while I was trying to find it when it had been so much later. I don't know. I don't know where I would be, but probably not right here.
Can you remember the reactions, or what I imagine being the lack of reactions, when you walked back to the pool and you sat down for the first time with shorts?
Yeah, no one cared. I was just a teenage girl wearing denim shorts like they all were. They didn't even know that it was such a big deal for me.
You were expecting them all to be like, woo! Yeah!
Like the coming out party.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, streamers come from the sky.
That's good.
The
I didn't even think they know that I left the room.
That's so funny. Oh.
It's funny. It's a battle within your own head for a majority of it, isn't it? It's just funny that you've been fighting an invisible person that doesn't exist.
Oh, hugely. I did notice the reactions in the streets change a little bit. People kind of noticed it a bit more. And I think through that time, those years where I was struggling, my mindset changed from these people, because people were staring at me before. I walked weird. And so, but my mindset changed from these people are staring at me maliciously to these people are staring at me because they're trying to figure out what's going on with my leg. They're not being malicious. I mean, there's the odd crazy person who literally stops and gets her points and gets her kids to look.
Yeah.
That's weird. But there's always going to be one, So yeah.
Can we talk? I love learning on this podcast, and I've never thought about. We've talked about prosthetics a lot, but never has someone actually made me realize that tailoring a prosthetic doesn't necessarily have to be about the stump itself. It has to be around the aesthetic, because you probably would have had, compared to your other, working leg, a different aesthetic, like wasted muscle, like less mass.
It's actually not a dumb question, Angus, because I think this is a Jess trademark, in all seriousness.
Oh.
I don't know many people who have the rest of the leg molded around
The aesthetic to look similar of the other one, because your leg would look, size-wise, muscle-wise, would look nothing like your other leg, right?
Oh yeah, it's insane how different it looks. I mean, I would, just for visuals, because obviously this is a podcast, I would say my calf is probably the size of my forearm, if not smaller. And my foot hasn't really grown since I was a kid. So yeah, it's a lot smaller than my other leg. And it's not, I mean, it is an aesthetic thing. That's the sole purpose that I get prosthetic thighs and things like that. But it is also a comfort thing. There's nothing more irritating than one leg being baggier and it's bunching and it's moving differently on one side than the other. And also the way, I'm a guinea pig in New Zealand for the surgery. So I've worked with a prosthetic team to get my prosthetic to where it is. And then I've gone all around the world since and seen other prosthetists. And it's not until I did that they're like, wow, for a rotation plaster, you would have no idea. Because most of them, the foot sits directly out of the prosthetic, whereas I was, and I think to my credit, was such an insecure young girl that I really wanted it to just look like it blended into my calf muscle. So I've kind of made that way, which is awesome.
Yeah, because when I'm walking down the street and I see, you wouldn't notice, Angus, but I know straight away if someone's an amputee because of the tailoring on their jeans or whatever. I'm like, that's a weird leg.
Yeah.
But you probably wouldn't notice it, but just because I grew up, in the world. But yours, I think you should trademark that. Can we hang on? Can we get our copywriters in here so we can all make heaps of cash? Because
I think the prosthetic company would benefit rather than Jess. But you can maybe get, a trademark.
What,
we can try.
Wait, what about the Quinn 3000? That's what you call it. You can do whatever you want. Yeah.
So
unfortunately, the rotation market is rotation plastic market is very small.
Very small and niche.
That's true.
It's niche.
So you've got a prosthetic thigh which matches your other thigh. I imagine quite specifically they would have measured, done molds of one thigh to match the other, just like they do with like Dylan's bum in his tennis wheelchair.
Yeah, this is a tough one at the moment. So I get my prosthetic thighs made from a company who make they make the costuming for Lord of the Rings and they make monsters and they do things like that. So
hang on, wait, go back.
Very cool.
That's sick. How do you hit them up? Do you go, Peter Jackson, I need to help him, like my leg? How does that come about?
Pretty much. My dad happened to know someone who knew Sir Richard Taylor, and Dad just.
But that's awesome.
Dad just called him and was like, hey, like Dad noticed just how badly, like I stopped going anywhere. I would not go to any event. I wouldn't go anywhere. And Dad was like, surely you make monsters. And this was years ago when nothing was done through CGI.
Yeah.
He was like, surely you can make the skill thigh.
Sorry to generalize as well, but of course, New Zealand guest, Lord of the Rings. That's just a straight up for the rest of the world.
I've never seen, can I just say?
Yeah, I was going to say, perfect. Oh.
Me and Jacinda are besties.
Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly.
So you worked with the prosthetic company that made, some of, Legolas's wig or headgear, whatever it could have been.
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Totally. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Sure.
But yes.
Very specific references.
But yeah, it's what was your question again about
so talking about
the changing
and your dad reaching out, and I don't know the reference to the guy that who was it talking about, the guy that he contacted?
Sir Richard Taylor. So he started Weta workshops and does all that kind of stuff behind the scenes there.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, it's something that the problem with having a prosthetic leg is that if your body, especially from a young age, if your body grows, it doesn't grow with you.
Mm-hmm.
So and these thighs, they're not cheap. And I had a thigh molded when I was about 16, and then up until probably 4 years ago, I was still wearing my 16-year-old thigh, and I can guarantee my good leg is not the size of my 16-year-old thigh. And due to complications, I'm back wearing my 16-year-old thigh at the moment. But I look at the alternative, which is a very, very, very skinny thigh. So for me, it's better than nothing. And I wouldn't say it looks the same. It looks like I'm wearing a skin color sports bandage, which is why most people assume that I've had knee surgery when they ask me what happened to my leg.
Right. Okay, that gives a good little visuals as to what it could look like. Awesome.
So you're 21 and you kind of did a 180 on your own mindset and how you viewed yourself and stuff like that. But there's one thing about looking in the mirror and accepting yourself, and another thing to be an advocate and to put yourself out there and start working in the world that you did and start sharing your story. When did you talk us through that journey? Because that's, as someone who's been through it, it's chalk and cheese. You know what I mean? It's a tough thing to go through.
Yeah, I largely fell into it, but at the same time, I always knew that sharing my story was something that I wanted to do. I just didn't know how that was going to happen. And I had always been really open to opportunities. You always get asked by the odd person to come share your story or talk to someone's friend who needed help or whatever. And so I'd always done that. And then I think it was 2016, I did a photo shoot. I'd never modeled in my life, but I had a friend who's a photographer, and I'd recently got a running blade prosthetic, which looked super rad and just really different. And so we did this photo shoot just for fun, put it on my Instagram, of which I had no idea how to use, and I had no followers or anything. It was just friends and family. And within literally overnight, I think I got about 10,000 followers, and it's just kind of blown since that. So I kind of in that way fell into the world, and through each post, and to me, I think it helped that I got thrown into that world, because I wasn't, I guess, really critical about what I was posting. I still just continued posting like, oh, this was me running today or attempting to run or whatever. So I was just posting about my life and my journey. And then I was starting to see the reaction back and how people were finding, I guess, inspiration in their lives from that. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So I guess being an advocate kind of just grew from that, and it just always felt right. Like I just felt like I was supposed to be telling my story, and I felt really comfortable in that environment. And then, as you know, Dylan, I'm sure just kind of one opportunity leads to another, and all of a sudden or one news article, all of a sudden you're a body image advocate. It's
exactly.
like things just kind of, and you just go with what feels right.
Do you find it tough? Like, I don't know how to really phrase this question, Jess. Because I don't really want to focus on the vanity of beauty, because that's not what this obvious episode is about. But do you find it difficult sometimes to be an advocate for body positivity, body image, and finding, this love for yourself when you're gorgeous and beautiful as a part, with and without the leg? Does that make sense? Do people with a disability find it hard to relate to you?
Yeah, that's the angle.
Because you're aesthetically beautiful to what people hold up to the idea of beauty. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And it's a conversation I have had in my head after being asked a similar kind of angle a couple of times. And it's something, and I've read articles on it. It's this whole, they call it pretty privilege. And it's something that I find it's a really weird thing to say, right?
Yeah,
like
it
it's
is a
like,
weird
I don't,
because you didn't name
uncomfortable.
yourself that. It's someone who's putting that title on you.
It's actually a good way to describe
Totally.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I get it. It's what people, I mean, I'm a model, right? I understand. Models still to this day pleasing to the eye, if you like. That's kind of a part of their role. And I do find it really hard with, I've never had any direct feedback from people within the disability community, but I often, and I find this with my disability itself, I can get around for the most part and do a lot of things. So I'm like, what is my right of being able to advocate when and especially with disability, there is literally no disability that's the same. Even another amputee, their experience is completely different from mine. So it's really hard to say that you're an advocate for that, right? When, I have no idea what Dylan goes through in his life directly, apart from listening to his 1-hour podcast interview. It's like, I think that's really hard. But yeah, in terms of the modeling side of it, yeah, it's hard. And I just hope that through what I'm doing, I'm not going to be the one disabled person that they pick all of the time. So I'm hoping that by me doing it once, they'll next pick, probably not Dylan, let's be honest, but they'll pick, someone else.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's a good way to put it, because, I have that as well. People like, the way that I describe it, and I'll ask you, if you take away the fact that you're a model and do what you do and an advocate, and that, what are you? you just an amputee who had cancer as well. You know what I mean? Just like them.
Totally.
So there is an
Totally.
element where, in mine's the Paralympic guy who's on the radio and that. I can't relate to him. He's dating a sexologist and all that stuff, right? But if you take away all that stuff, I also get people not letting me into their cafe because they've got 2 steps and they tell me I'm a fire hazard. Like, it still happens, you know what I mean? So I think you need people to share stories like you are doing and putting yourself out there, because our hope, and I don't want to speak on your behalf, Jess, but our hope is it permeates down to the next generation and other people. And
Totally.
you don't want to, I don't actually want to ask you about the landscape in New Zealand, because what I say in Australia is I do not want to be the only one that's always on TV, right?
Yeah,
There needs to be
100%.
actors, actresses, songwriters, artists, broadcasters, not just me all the time. Like, I get sick of myself as well. What's it like in New Zealand? Like, we don't know. What's it like over there for you?
I personally think it's awesome. Obviously, every minority there needs to be work in that at the moment, in terms of representation, in terms of everything. But I do think, and in my own experience, which is all I can speak from, I think New Zealand is in a really great place with that. I think we've seen some massive changes at the moment with our culture and how accepting and how open we are to learning about our culture and where we come from. And I think that's amazing. I think I'm definitely not the only person that I see on the screens. In fact, I think people are pretty over me now. So new people are coming through, which is amazing. There's some incredible, I don't know if you guys know of Grace Stratton, who's an amazing, she owns a modeling agency in New Zealand for people with differences. And I just think she is absolutely amazing. We have so many mental health advocates here. We have so many people with disabilities who
Jade
are...
O'Connell. Jade O'Connell was a previous guest, New Zealand girl with Tourette's.
Yeah. She's blown up on social. She's
huge on TikTok, got millions of followers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. From an outside looking in, we think New Zealand's like that too, if that makes sense. So I think it's a beacon, even to the point where we talked about this on radio the other week, you and I, Angus, the new Bachelor in New Zealand. He said, I want all shapes and sizes and colours, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about this in the Australian version of The Bachelor and Married at First Sight, are all white blonde people, right?
It drives me crazy.
So we saw that. I saw that article. I was like, awesome. And the other thing as well, when people think of diversity, they think of race straight away, and that's it. And it's like, yeah, okay, they could be, but what about there's other, sexual orientation or disability or whatever. So it's good to hear where they're at. Angus,
I really considered going on The Bachelor only for the point of representation. It annoyed me so much. I was like, the thought of going on a dating show just makes my ears burn. But I wanted to get on there just to be like, are you serious?
I use this example as well. Imagine how good the ratings would be, right? If I'd use myself as an example, if I'm The Bachelor and 20 girls get out and 10 of them are freaked out by the wheelchair, that would be the best show ever.
Back in the limo.
Get back in. And then they'll be like, you're allowed to go back in.
Here's where I think, though...
Abort mission.
What am I doing? What did you tell me this? Oh, that's so funny.
Here's where I think the change needs to come when it comes to reality television examples. The casting of the main protagonist / bachelorette, bachelor, married contestants, they need to be the ones accepting to
diversity,
being open to diversity, because the casting directors will always put in some tokenism. There's an Indian guy in The Bachelor.
They get out first round, but
a black girl. And no. The person always keeps them around for 1 or 2 weeks.
But they hate them,
But then if you go and check out Lockie, Maddie, all of the Bachelors, the final 6, white women. But you've got to find the person who is open to, because that's where the real meaningful conversations are going to come around. Because I guarantee you on those shows, they don't talk about, why did you apply as, an Asian person on this show? Did you feel a little bit held back? There's no real open conversations that are going to happen around candlelight. It's going to be these, tell me your favorite color. No, get down to the real tart. You want to talk about your color.
You have a partner, don't you, Jess?
Totally.
Todd, is that his name?
Yes,
I was talking.
do. Recently.
Damn it. You could have been it. You could have been The Bachelor.
Goddamn, Todd.
You would have slashed. You would have killed it here in Australia.
I did think about it, but I did dance.
Well, breaking up with Todd for it.
Breaking up with Todd. Sorry, Todd. How are you feeling? ListenAble too?
Before I thought about it. A, my mum was going to kill me if I ever did it. And B, I had done Dancing with the Stars and I loved that experience. And I felt when I accepted that was the only form of reality TV show that I would ever go on, because it's live and no one can edit me to be someone I'm not. So
good call. Good point.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Todd then. How did that come about? Is this the first boyfriend? Have you had a few over the journey? When did you find you had to love yourself post 21 before you could open yourself up to the availability of somebody else doing the same?
All of the above, except the first boyfriend thing. So I did have a boyfriend when I was 21. I must have got that age slightly wrong. Maybe I was about 18 when the whole shorts thing happened. Because then I had my first boyfriend about 21 once I had found myself a little bit more. And that was just your typical kind of young love kind of situation that eventually fizzled. And then, yeah, from about end of uni until last year, I've pretty much been single. Obviously, I've had a lot of what I've called situationships with a lot of
that's good
asshole men, basically. And I was just always adamant of, all of my friends were in relationships really young, which, if that's what they want to do, that's awesome. But I just wanted to spend my life understanding who I was as a person. And I think maybe that comes from, I wanted to know who Jess Quinn was aside from Jess Quinn with one leg, and I wanted to explore what I was doing. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I ended up in a job that was speaking about me having one leg for that whole time. But still, it was that kind of self-discovery. And I didn't want to be someone else's before I knew who I was and really actually like the person that I was and what I wanted to do with my life. So yeah, I kind of just didn't really take that side of things too seriously. And in my weird kind of job, I was kind of all over the show, which makes it quite hard to meet someone. But yeah, then I was living in LA just pre-COVID and then moved home mostly because of COVID. And yeah, jumped on a dating app, which I'm one of those people, I download them and I delete it within probably an hour because I'm like, nah, this isn't for me. And I just happened to stick it out that day. And yeah, we went on a date and Bob's your uncle.
Were you on one of the famous people apps?
Raya.
You were you?
I'm not gonna lie, I did Rayo when I was in LA,
yeah.
and my God, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I never went on a date. Yeah. In fact, it was the first app date that I've ever been on because I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
You just gave us a little. I just want to just play in that space of the United States quickly. Obviously, Australia and New Zealand and Great Britain, I would say, are the leaders in inclusion and diversity, especially in mainstream media. And because people are pushing down the doors. America, horrible. Not great. I think I call them good at the hardware, which is like ramps and elevators and screen readers, but bad at the software, inclusion, jobs. They talk to you like, hello, would you like to come on the plane? And you're like, why are you talking to me like that? Were you working over in America?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to say I had the opposite experience.
Fill me in. How was yours?
Two parts of this. I went to America because I got signed to a modeling agency there, and my modeling agency is all about representing diversity. Even though I was the only disabled person, there was other forms of diversity, so they were getting there. So on that side of things, I would go to photo shoots where they wanted someone like me and all of that kind of stuff. So I felt included in those environments. What I liked in America is that people be like, oh, you're an amputee, or like, why are you limping? I'm like, oh, I'm an amputee. And they're like, oh my God, Brad, my uncle's an amputee or whatever. Because there's so many veterans over there and it's such a bigger population that all of these things are a lot more normal. Whereas coming from New Zealand, which is our whole country is smaller than the size of LA, the city that I was living in, it's not many people know people who have disabilities or have been through things like I've been through. So I think I really liked that side of it where it just felt kind of normal. And because of that, I think I found a lot more accessibility. Although I don't have huge access needs in terms of getting around, I did find that things were a little bit more accessible because they have to cater to a lot more people than we do.
What about work and inclusion at work and getting jobs and the way they interacted with you? How was it over there?
Again, I was really lucky. And I think I don't think I can I guess say properly because I was in an environment that the job was literally created for me, almost like they were doing a photo shoot and they wanted me there. So I don't think I had a full kind of experience of that.
Yeah. The reason I say it is, do you know any singers, actors, actresses, models with disabilities? Like they would come out of America. That's where all of our, Hollywood stars are and that, and there's just not enough.
I 100% agree. Yeah. Or The Bachelor.
Yeah. Or The Bachelor, exactly right. Or Bachelorette, which is you.
Or Bachelor.
Sorry, Todd.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, Todd.
Well, coming back home to Todd, and finding love to yourself, how did you go with intimacy and your body image in that relationship and allowing yourself to be seen?
Yeah, good. It's not something I think because I didn't start dating until I'd gone through that really hard stuff with the whole hiding my body, that I felt good. And I think I've been lucky for the most part that I have had intimacy with people who have been really awesome. In saying that, I've dated a lot of assholes, but they weren't assholes about, not about my disability.
Okay.
I've probably only had one funny story that's come out of a situation like that. That was a one night stand situation where he was drunk. We went home. He felt my leg, asked why my thigh was so squishy, and then I had to tell him that I had a foam thigh because I have one leg. But to his credit, he was drunk and felt terrible in the morning.
Nice. He stuck around. He didn't bail. All right, good.
No, he didn't bail.
Oh, good. I'm glad he stuck.
That relationship wasn't going to go anywhere. No. But no, I've been pretty lucky in that sense. And yeah, this new relationship is just more than I could have kind of imagined in that sense.
Is there a moment of revealing your leg without the prosthetic to that person? Because we had an amazing guest called Jess Van Ziel who doesn't have one eye, and so she talked about with her partner. He finally said at home, because she never let him see her without, because she's just got her socket that exists. She doesn't have a fake eye or anything like that. And she talks about this beautiful moment of her partner going, "Can you please take it off?" And then this moment of acceptance. For you, was there a moment of, showing what lies beneath the prosthetic?
I think it's still building. Which might sound insane, but I actually, so up until Todd, I have never taken my leg off in bed with anyone. And I'm 28, which is quite crazy.
Good honesty.
Yeah.
Love
and
that.
I remember I was living with my sister at the time when we first started dating, and it's not comfortable. And to be fair, the last 2 years I've been going through a lot with my leg, so it's even more uncomfortable for me to sleep with my prosthetic on. And I remember texting my sister and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I don't even know what I was afraid of. Like, I even said to my sister, I was like, I know everything's going to be fine. It's just, I've never not done it. I've never taken my leg off around someone else. Like, even my friends, I haven't.
So you sleep all night with your prosthetic leg on when you're with someone. That is so uncomfortable. I couldn't imagine how uncomfortable that is.
So I dated a guy for 3 years, 2.5 years, and never took my leg off.
What?
And he's a great guy, so I don't want to say anything, but there was a lot of that. I could also have just done it, but there was a lot of I didn't feel comfortable to do it, whereas this, so comfortable. But there is things that, I don't even, if I'm at home staying at my parents', I don't even like crawling around at home. My parents will see me and they're nothing, it's completely normal, but I just feel very vulnerable in that state. So I like to, I think that's the thing with having a prosthetic. I wake up in the morning, I've done this my whole life, I put on my leg and I do not take my leg off until I go to sleep. So I am with my prosthetic all the time. I don't really even know myself without it. So to then do that with other people is quite confronting, I guess. So yeah, it's definitely a huge thing to go through.
Thanks for I was going to say, thanks for being so honest with that as well, because we have people who are in similar situations to you listening who would feel the same, and they would think, oh, she wouldn't do that. Look at her. She's confident. She's out there. You know what I mean? And that's what it's all about.
It's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah. And it's hard on yourself more than anyone else. I know anyone that I choose to let into my life, they're great people because I'm not going to date anyone that isn't. Yeah. And therefore I know they're going to be accepting, but there's a lot that you've got to go through. It's the same as the shorts thing. That was something I had to go through. It wasn't about anyone else, So yeah.
Oh, well, good luck on the journey to that moment, That's
well, I
awesome.
mean, hang on. The journey's over. She's already dropped Todd. She's the new bachelorette.
Don't start rumors.
Just kidding, Todd. I love you, Todd. I'm only joking. I'm on Instagram. I see Todd. I see Todd. Get him out there. Yeah.
Oh my God, don't. He hates the Instagram.
Jess, we finish our podcast, not usually finish, but most of the episodes we finish with a thing called the Bowl of Uncomfortable, where we let people ask questions that they might not feel comfortable asking you in person. They relay it through us and give us the tough moments. I believe we have 2.
Yeah. The first one is, do you think the only reason you've had success in modeling and the storytelling stuff you do is because you have one leg?
Yes, I do. And I'm okay with that. And I'm happy with that. And I'm not saying that because I don't like the way I look. I'm saying that because that's how it was. And that was my purpose. And I don't really like modeling. I wouldn't have gone to modeling had it not been for trying to make a point. So yes, 100%. I find this, I hope this isn't going to be rambling on for too long, but I find this really interesting. I actually even said it to Todd the other day, but I grew up with people like family friends or whatever being like, oh, you're so pretty, you're so beautiful, da, da, da. And I always believed, not in a self-doubt way, not that I didn't believe that I was beautiful, but I just assumed they were kind of saying that because it's like, oh, you're so pretty, poor girl has one leg, like as a kind of sympathetic kind of thing. So I kind of grew up with that. So the modeling thing's really interesting in that sense, because of that. And so I do a lot of the time think I'm here because of my obvious differences. But I wouldn't have it any other way because that's the whole reason I'm modeling.
Yeah, you wouldn't be chatting to us, and we're grateful for it as well. The second one comes from Candace on Facebook. She says, do you think someone with a disability has more of a right to not love their body than someone who's, let's say, abled with a bit of slight acne and hates their skin they're in?
That is a great question. And it's something I've never been able to put into words. That's a really good way to put it, but it's something I've definitely thought about. Something that I get a lot, and Dylan, you might have experience with this as well, is the whole, oh, like I've really hurt my ankle. Oh shit, I shouldn't complain because you've got one leg.
Yep.
But what I really believe, and something I live by and try to share, is I think that all of our mountains are as big to us. Our own mountains are, I guess, relevant to us, right? So someone in an enabled body who has acne, that's probably just as hard for them as it is for me to live in my body. If you put it out into the world, obviously those are two really different things, but we don't know any better than the bodies that we live in. And yes, like people like myself or Dylan, we go through much bigger challenges in our life, but we're also used to that. So I think that I don't think it's a right or wrong thing, but I think perspective always has a place, and I think everyone should remember that. But I also think no one should be felt bad for their insecurities just because they are in a abled body or they have another situation.
Great question. Great answer.
Yeah.
I love that.
And a great guest.
Yeah. Oh, I've got one more to go. Just one more before we finish. And I just love how you put this on your Instagram. Coincidentally, the other day before we spoke, right? I get asked this question all the time, and it's a BS question, right? Because you can't go back in time and talk to yourself. What would you tell your 8-year-old self? And there's a photo of you with chemo, you're really skinny, super cute in the bath, right? But I'm always like, well, I can't go back and tell myself because I haven't got a time machine. But the way you can ask it, and I like it when people say it to me this way, there are people like you currently, or parents of kids like you who are listening right now, right? So what is that bit of advice that you could give?
I do always find this question so hard because there's so many different ways you could answer it. But I think I would go along with what I said. I think there's a balance between sheltering from the hardships that are still going to continue after going through something like that, and also allowing your kids or yourself to just live your life. And I think finding that balance is really important. Something that I live by is, I think there's this it's like happiness porn at the moment. Like you just have to be positive and you have to be happy and like get the good mindset, you'll be fine. It's like your Tony Robbins kind of attitude. And I just don't think that's healthy or realistic. So I kind of live by the mindset of, if you're going to have a bad day, just don't unpack and live in that situation or in that environment. I think, I don't want to sit here and tell someone who's going through something like that to be positive and to be happy and to go get through it, it'll be fine. Like one of my mottos is you've got this, and you've got this. But I also think it's okay for the journey ahead to be full of ups and downs, and to just know that, just know that it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I love it. You're a weapon.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people who take a lot out of this.
It's going to be a great episode, and not just for people with disability. You know what I mean? There's lots of lessons for anybody.
Look at me, able-bodied white guy over here.
Yeah.
Hey, you're rare.
Who still hasn't done a TED Talk. Am I right?
I'll find my purpose.
Hey, you got to, once all this COVID's done, you got to come dominate the Australian market as well. You're a star. We really appreciate you putting the time in and being some really honest answers in there, things I didn't know about you from Googling, you know what I mean? And I appreciate that you were so honest, because I think your story is going to help a lot of people. You're a star.
Thanks,
Thank
Jess.
you. Thank you. And thank you for doing what you guys do. Honestly, I'm a new listener, but I have not stopped listening in the last few days. And I am someone who lives with a disability, and I have learned so much. So thanks for that.
Legend.